Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. It was a brisk fall day in October of 2020 when Fern Baird found herself visiting Ketchum, Idaho. From Park City, Utah, Fern was no stranger to the outdoors and hiking. She loved the outdoors and not only thoroughly enjoyed hiking, but was also an avid skier, spending many years herself as a ski instructor. On the morning of October 19th, 2020, Fern Baird went down to the hotel front desk staff and asked for some recommendations on what to do in the area that day. The Prairie Creek Trail was suggested to her, and she decided that sounded like a beautiful hike. She signed the guest book at the trailhead and set off to hike the nearly 10-mile loop, excited to view the different small waterfalls on her way to the lake. On the morning of October 22nd, 2020, 3 days after Fern left for her hike, the hotel she was staying at realized that she had not been back to her room in those 3 days. It would be the hotel staff that alerts authorities to Fern's disappearance. Her vehicle was quickly found at the parking lot for the Prairie Creek Trailhead. There was no sign of Fern anywhere. Where is Fern Alexandra Baird? Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast. This story continues with our focus on missing in national and state parks. Thank you so much for being here, for supporting our show, and helping us spread awareness of these unsolved missing person cases. The story of Fern Baird is an interesting one, and the more I looked into the area that she vanished from, the more ominous it seemed. And it might call out the forestry department for even keeping this trail open to the public. Fern Baird was a successful real estate broker in Park City, Utah. She also owned a bag company called Yopa Bag, where her focus was on utility and sport bags for the outdoors. In 2020, Fern was 62 years old. Her son was living in California, and she was enjoying time hiking and adventuring out on her own. Her businesses were doing well, and things overall were going great for Fern. In October, she took a trip to Ketchum, Idaho. The reason for that trip is never explained, but Fern wanted to enjoy some of the outdoors while she was there. The state offers beautiful countryside, pine forests, mountains, and meadows, and Fern wanted to go exploring. On October 19th, Fern went to the front desk of the hotel and asked for some recommendations on what to do in the area. One hike in particular that the staff member mentioned was the Prairie Creek Trail, part of the Sawtooth National Forest. This sounded like just what Fern was looking for. She drove up to the trailhead, parked her car, and walked over to the guest book. She signed that guest book at 1:17 p.m., and along with her name, she wrote, quote, "To the lake and back," end quote. The Prairie Creek Trail is actually a network of a few different trails. It's actually pretty confusing the more I looked into the different trails off of the Prairie Creek Trail. And it was mentioned that she was likely doing the Prairie Creek Trail, that is a 10-mile hike out and back, generally taking hikers anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours to complete. In any event, whether Fern wanted to do a longer trail or one of the shorter ones, she was experienced. She was dressed appropriately, she was very physically fit, and despite some of the trail being listed as moderately challenging, it still should be a very doable hike for Fern. There were some other hikers entering the trailhead around the same time that also signed that guest book, but that trail is generally very lightly traveled. Fern set off that day, happy to be enjoying nature and hoping to see some beautiful sights along the way. Meanwhile, back at the hotel Fern was staying at, a few days had gone by before staff noticed that Fern hadn't returned to her room, and all of her belongings were left behind. Blaine County Sheriff Department was quickly alerted, and immediately they decided to start a search of the area for Fern. It was now October 22nd, 3 days after Fern set off on her hike. Fairly quickly, her 2018 Subaru was located in the parking lot for the Prairie Creek Trailhead. Law enforcement noted that based on all of her belongings being left behind in her vehicle, personal stuff like her purse, they believed that she had originally set off intending to only do a day hike, meaning she wasn't planning on camping or spending the night anywhere. She should have returned to her car by now. Her signature was located in the guest book, and it was timestamped 1:17 p.m., October 19th. There was another couple that signed the guest book within minutes of Fern, as well as another family of 5. Law enforcement decided to send search and rescue out on the trails to look for Fern immediately, fearing that maybe she became lost and injured and was in need of help. They also set out to locate those other hikers that had signed that guest book around the same time. They could possibly have some insight, as they may have been the last ones to see her that day. Around 40 search and rescue workers hit the trails in the next few days, looking for any clues or any signs of Fern. They searched on foot, on ATVs, they utilized trained search dogs, and they even flew helicopters overhead. But no clues and no signs of Fern were discovered. Her family was also insistent that while she was an experienced hiker, she wasn't a daredevil. She was always known to stick to the trails and make smart hiking decisions. She never ventured off trail, and she knew the dangers that doing so could bring. It simply made no sense that she was nowhere to be found. Unfortunately, by October 30th, just 8 days after Fern was reported as missing and 11 days after she was last seen, the search for Fern had to be called off due to weather conditions and the conditions of the terrain itself. Nothing of Fern's was ever found. It was as if she disappeared into thin air out in that Idaho wilderness. The area of Prairie Creek Trail is an interesting one. First, there are a few different trails that one can take, and hikers have had a lot to say about some of them. In late 2019, one of the trails experienced a rock slide, making it virtually impassable. Hikers trying to hike to the lake that way found themselves having to turn back or find another way around this rock slide. It was mentioned that the park should have closed that trail. It was that dangerous at that time. Now, this rock slide happened in late 2019. It's October of 2020 when Fern goes missing. Could there still have been some dangerous terrain out there? Could Fern have tried to go around that rock slide and went off trail in doing so? Others yet have spoken up and said that the trail is very poorly marked, and there are many times where hikers aren't even sure if they're still on the trail. They feel like they almost have to forge their own path. Yet this seems another way that a hiker could become lost and confused out there. The 10-mile hike is listed as moderately challenging as well. Not necessarily a very easy hike, but Fern was no beginner either. She should have been able to navigate it without any trouble. Fern was 62 years old. She was in great health, but could she have had a medical emergency out there when she was all alone? The Prairie Creek Trails are located within the Sawtooth National Forest. This park consists of over 2 million acres, 1,000 miles of hiking, 81 campgrounds, 1,100 lakes, and several ski areas. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, it's dangerous. Fern's family doesn't understand how Fern could go out on this hike and never return. Someone with her experience and her knowledge? They quickly offered up a $25,000 reward for information leading them to Fern. Authorities would also spend a year trying to locate those other hikers that had signed the guest book around the same time as Fern did. They finally did. However, they were unable to provide any additional clues or information that could help them in their investigation at all. A year after her disappearance, another organized search was conducted in that area, but once again, nothing was found. What do you think happened to Fern Baird? Did she become lost, injured, have a medical episode maybe? Why hasn't anyone been able to find her out there? Perhaps she wanted to disappear. Or could she have run into foul play out there? But again, there have been zero clues leading to that conclusion either. Since her disappearance, her bank accounts, her cell phone, and credit cards have not been touched. Fern Baird is described as a Caucasian female standing about 5 foot 5 inches tall and weighing around 115 pounds when she was last seen in October of 2020. She has brown hair and brown eyes, and she was wearing a light gray jacket, dark colored pants, gray gloves, a dark colored mask, and a dark colored fanny pack. Fern was 62 years old when she was last seen. She would today be 65. Anyone with any information on the whereabouts of Fern Alexandra Baird is asked to contact the Blaine County Sheriff's Office at 208-788-5555. Thank you all so much for listening to Fern's story today. I know there's so much wilderness out there. Looking for Fern might be like looking for a needle in a haystack, but I'm still surprised that no clues were ever discovered. Nothing. Authorities knew exactly where they should have been searching for Fern. How far could she have gone that even the search dogs, trained to pick up scents, couldn't find her? I'm curious to know your thoughts on this one. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons case. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.